My name is Clara Hayes. I'm a landscape architect, which is a profession that sounds more romantic than it is. It's less about wandering through fields of wildflowers with a sketchbook and more about soil composition, drainage gradients, and the stubborn realities of what will and will not grow in a particular patch of earth. But I love it. I love the logic of it, the quiet partnership with nature. I love taking a forgotten, neglected space and helping it find its best self. 3 years ago, I did the same thing for myself. I bought a small house on Hawthorne Lane, a little blue cottage with a crooked porch and a yard full of weeds. It was all I could afford, but it was mine. I poured every spare dollar and every weekend into it, sanding floors until my arms ached, painting walls late into the night, and slowly, patiently, coaxing a garden from the tired soil. This house wasn't just a structure of wood and plaster. It was a testament to my own resilience, a sanctuary I had built with my own 2 hands. Every mortgage payment, sent in early with a little extra chipped off the principal, felt like a prayer of gratitude for that independence. The notice arrived on a Tuesday, tucked into a sheaf of junk mail. It was from a bank I didn't recognize, the letterhead crisp and severe. My stomach hollowed out before I even tore open the envelope. Foreclosure. The word was an absurdity, a misprint from a different reality. My hands, usually steady from years of drawing fine lines and handling delicate seedlings, began to tremble. I read the formal, sterile language over and over, my mind refusing to process it. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. My payment records were in a neat file box in my office, a perfect, unbroken chain of responsibility. I called the number on the letter, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I paced the worn floorboards of my kitchen, the familiar groove under my feet a stark contrast to the vertigo I was feeling. There must be some error, I said, my voice thin and reedy. I'm not just current on my mortgage, I'm ahead on my payments. The woman on the other end was polite, detached. Ma'am, I understand your confusion. This notice isn't regarding your primary mortgage. This is for the home equity line of credit taken out 4 months ago. That account is now 90 days delinquent. A line of credit? The words were foreign objects in my mouth. I never took one out. There was a pause, the rustle of papers. Our records show the loan was processed at our Cedar Creek branch. The signatories are Robert and Margaret Hayes, with you, Clara Hayes, as co-signer on the property. The world didn't spin. It simply stopped. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirp of a bird outside my window, the very air in my lungs, it all froze. My parents. And with their names came another, a shadow that had fallen over every good thing in my life for as long as I could remember. Leo. It was always about Leo. The drive to their house in Willow Bend was a blur. The familiar streets, lined with mature oaks and stately brick homes, seemed to mock me with their placid perfection. I used the emergency key they'd given me years ago, the one I was meant to use if they were on vacation or if something happened. I let myself into the silent house. The air was thick with the scent of my mother's potpourri and the faint, cloying smell of deceit. Their home office door was locked. It was a flimsy interior lock, one I'd learned to pick with a bobby pin when I was 15 after Leo started helping himself to my birthday money. The file was exactly where I knew it would be, in the top drawer of my father's antique desk, in a beige folder, neatly labeled with my address. The home equity documents lay inside, my signature at the bottom of each page a cruel, perfect forgery. It was my father's handwriting, disguised as mine. He'd always had a talent for mimicry. I was still holding the papers, the sharp edges digging into my palms, when the garage door rumbled open. I heard my mother's light, quick steps on the slate entryway, followed by my father's heavier, more deliberate tread. Clara. My mother's voice was bright, but it faltered when she saw me standing in the doorway of the office, the folder in my hand. A flicker of something, guilt, or perhaps just annoyance at being caught, crossed her face before she rearranged it into a mask of maternal concern. Sweetheart, what a surprise. What are you doing here? I held up the folder, my hand surprisingly steady. I think you know. My father's jovial expression evaporated, replaced by a familiar, stony defensiveness. He didn't even feign ignorance. We had to help your brother, Clara. He was in a difficult situation. My brother. My voice was unnervingly calm, a quiet pool in the center of a storm. You helped him by forging my signature? By putting my home, the one thing in this world that is entirely mine, at risk. I paused. How much was it? It's a temporary measure, my mother said quickly, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. Just until Leo gets back on his feet. How much? I repeated, my gaze fixed on my father. He crossed his arms, a gesture of paternal authority that no longer had any power over me. $150,000. The number didn't feel real. It was an abstraction, a weight so immense I couldn't comprehend it. For what? He had some gambling debts, Mom whispered, twisting the strap of her purse. They were unsavory people, Clara. They were making threats. So you decided the solution was to steal from me? I placed the folder on the polished surface of the desk. The sound was a soft thud, but it echoed in the silence like a gunshot. Did it not occur to either of you to ask me? You would have said no, my father stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. A dry, brittle laugh escaped my lips. You're damn right I would have. Because I am the only person in this family who seems to understand that actions have consequences. Watch your tone, young lady, my father warned, his voice low. We did what was necessary to protect this family. No, I said, the bitter truth finally surfacing. You did what you always do. You sacrificed me to enable him. That's not fair, my mother cried, a tear tracing a path through her foundation. We love you both equally. Equally. The word was so absurd it was almost comical. When was the last time you risked your own financial security to bail me out of a problem I created? When was the last time you even called just to ask how I was, without it being a prelude to asking for a favor for Leo? Her expression softened into one of pity, which was somehow worse than the lies. You've always been the strong one, Clara. The responsible one. You never needed us. The words landed like a blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I needed parents, I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a deep, ancient sorrow. I needed you to protect me with the same fierce loyalty you show him. But you know what? You're right. I am strong. And my strength will no longer be used to carry the weight of this family's dysfunction. I picked up the folder and turned toward the door. My father's voice, sharp with alarm, stopped me. What are you going to do with that? I turned back, my eyes meeting his. For the first time, I didn't see my father. I saw a man who had used me, who had taken my trust and my love and mortgaged them without a second thought. What I should have done a long time ago, I said, my voice clear and steady. I'm going to hold you accountable. You'll tear this family apart. Mom wailed. No, Mom, I said, the quiet finality of the words settling in my own heart. You already did that. I'm just going to bring it into the light. I drove to Sophie's apartment, the city lights smearing through the tears that were finally falling. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. She didn't speak until I was curled up on her sofa, a mug of tea warming my cold hands. I told her everything, my voice a monotone recital of the facts. Her expression shifted from shock to a quiet, simmering fury. Those manipulative, selfish, she trailed off, shaking her head. Clara, please tell me you're going to the police. I'm doing more than that. My grief was beginning to crystallize into something else, something cold and hard and clear. Resolve. For months, a little voice in the back of my mind had been whispering a warning. It had prompted me to quietly create an LLC, a legal fortress to protect the small portfolio I'd built from my freelance work. It was a just-in-case measure, a defense against a threat I hadn't wanted to name. I pulled up the documents on my phone and showed her. Sophie's eyes widened as she read. You've been preparing for this? Let's just say I've learned to build retaining walls against emotional erosion. I took a deep breath, my hands steady now. They think I'm the responsible one? The strong one? Fine. I'll be the most responsible, strongest person they've ever met. What's your first move? She asked, her voice low and serious. I managed a small, tired smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'm going to teach my family the meaning of a word they've never understood. Consequences. The 2 weeks that followed were an exercise in surreal civility. I attended the obligatory Sunday dinner, my presence a silent act of reconnaissance. I nodded as my mother recounted neighborhood gossip and managed a polite smile as Leo sauntered in, reeking of expensive cologne and cheap desperation. He bragged about a new business venture, a transparent fiction that my parents absorbed with beaming pride. I watched them, a scientist observing a foreign species, marveling at their capacity for self-deception. The lies flowed between them as easily as the overpriced wine my father poured. Meanwhile, Sophie and I transformed my home office, my sun-drenched sanctuary, into a quiet command center. We didn't speak of war or revenge. We spoke of clarity and truth. We gathered documents, bank statements, property records, credit reports. We weren't building a case. We were excavating a history, unearthing the foundations of my family's rot. Look at this, Sophie said one evening, her finger tracing a line on her laptop screen. A series of small but steady withdrawals from your father's investment account, followed by deposits of the exact same amounts into Leo's checking account. For years. She paused, her brow furrowed. And this is an insurance payout from 2016. Wasn't that the year of your car accident? I leaned in, my hand instinctively going to the faint, silvery scar on my collarbone. The settlement was for my medical bills and physical therapy. I remembered my father's calm reassurance as I lay in the hospital bed, his voice a soothing balm. He said he would handle the financials, that I just needed to focus on healing. Well, according to the bank records, the check was deposited into a joint account under your name and his, Sophie said softly. The full amount was withdrawn in cash 2 days later. The timing was a punch to the gut. That was the week Leo was arrested for a DUI and needed to post a significant bond. Bingo. Sophie added a new file to our growing digital archive. The betrayal was no longer a single, gaping wound, but 1,000 smaller cuts, each one a fresh sting. The breakthrough came during my parents' anniversary dinner at a lavish downtown restaurant. My mother, radiant in silk, clinked her crystal glass for a toast. As my father began a long, meandering speech about their 35 years of partnership, I excused myself. Instead of heading to the restroom, I slipped down the hall to the private coat check. My father's briefcase was there. The lock was laughably simple. He had always underestimated me. I worked quickly, my phone's camera silently capturing photos of every document in his personal folder. He had a false bottom in his briefcase, a trick he'd probably thought was clever. I'd discovered it by accident years ago. 15 minutes later, I was back at the table, sliding my phone into my purse just as the waiter arrived with a decadent chocolate lava cake. There you are, darling, my mother said, smiling. We were about to celebrate without you. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, my smile feeling like a mask. Later that night, Sophie and I huddled over her laptop, examining the photos. And then we found it. Oh, Clara, she breathed, zooming in on a letter from a different bank. It was a rejection letter. For a loan application. They had tried to take out another mortgage, this one on a commercial property, using my name and credit score as the primary applicant. The bank flagged it as potentially fraudulent. I read aloud, my voice hollow. They requested an in-person meeting to verify my identity. This is attempted identity theft, Clara, Sophie said, her voice firm. This isn't just about a dysfunctional family dynamic anymore. This is criminal. This is a pattern. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all settling on me. I thought of all the times I had quietly paid off the credit card Leo opened in my name in college. The loans for his failed startups that were never repaid. The constant emotional blackmail, the carefully crafted narrative that I was the lucky one, the one who didn't have his struggles, and therefore it was my duty to help. You know the most painful part? I said quietly, looking out at my moonlit garden. They never had to steal from me. If they had come to me, been honest, admitted they were in over their heads, I would have helped. I would have drained my savings for them. But that would have required them to admit that their golden boy isn't perfect. It would have required humility. And that's the one thing they don't have. My phone vibrated with a text from my mother. Thank you for such a lovely evening, sweetheart. Your father and I are so proud of the wonderful children we raised. I showed the message to Sophie, who just shook her head. The delusion is breathtaking. They genuinely believe they've done nothing wrong. They probably see it as protecting me from the messy details, I mused. In their minds, they're being good parents. So, what's the next step in bringing them into the light? Sophie asked gently. I pulled up the contact information for Mr. Finch, the banker at Cedar Creek Mutual who had processed the fraudulent loan. Time to shed a little light in his direction. But first, let's finalize the asset transfer. I want everything I've built to be untouchable. The LLC transfer will be complete by morning, Sophie confirmed. Once that's done, your nest egg is secure. Perfect. I began to compose an email to Mr. Finch, my tone carefully neutral, inquiring about a loan on my property that I had no record of authorizing. Let's see how my father explains this to a man whose career he could jeopardize. You know how they'll react, Sophie warned softly. They'll tell you you're being cruel, that you're destroying the family. I thought of the foreclosure notice, a piece of paper that had threatened to tear down the very walls of my sanctuary. I thought of the years of quiet theft, of my love and loyalty being used as a currency to pay for their mistakes. A family doesn't systematically exploit one of its own, I said, my voice firm with a newfound certainty. It's time they learned what a family is supposed to be. The reply from Mr. Finch was almost instantaneous. Ms. Hayes, this is a very serious allegation. I would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. I showed Sophie the email. She gave me a small, supportive smile. The first stone has been cast. No, I corrected her, thinking of the mountain of evidence we had uncovered. The first crack has appeared in the dam. The truth is coming. I was sitting in a quiet corner of a coffee shop, documents spread before me, waiting for Mr. Finch, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Clara, it's Olivia, Leo's ex. I heard you're finally standing up to them. I think I have something that can help you. Can we meet? My heart clenched. Olivia, a sweet, trusting girl who had been utterly broken by my brother's charm and my family's callousness. I hadn't seen her since their tumultuous breakup 2 years ago. I agreed to meet her at my house later that day. Mr. Finch arrived looking flustered, his expensive suit doing little to hide his agitation. He listened, his face growing paler as I calmly laid out the facts, presenting him with a copy of the fraudulent document. I had no idea, he stammered. Robert is an old friend. He assured me all the paperwork was in order, that you were aware of the arrangement. Did you verify my signature? Did you speak to me directly as the property owner? I asked, my voice even. He couldn't meet my eyes. No. I took him at his word. Your friendship with my father doesn't supersede your legal and ethical obligations, Mr. Finch, I said quietly. You facilitated a fraud that could have cost me my home. I stood up, leaving him sputtering in his chair. I suggest you get your own legal counsel. When I got home, Olivia was already waiting on my porch step. She looked different. The soft vulnerability was gone, replaced by a guarded, weary strength. She carried a large accordion file. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice low. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She opened the file on my dining room table. It was a meticulous record of her own financial ruin. Remember the bistro Leo was supposedly opening? The one your parents were so excited about. I nodded, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. There was no bistro. She laid out credit card statements, loan agreements, bank records. He used my savings, my credit cards, my good name. He convinced me to co-sign on loans. By the time I realized the money was going straight to online betting sites, I was over $90,000 in debt. My hands shook as I looked at the papers. My brother's signature was scrawled everywhere, a careless autograph of destruction. Olivia, why didn't you go to the police? A bitter laugh escaped her. Oh, I tried. But your parents got to me first. She pulled out a smaller envelope. Inside was a non-disclosure agreement and a cashier's check for a fraction of what she'd lost. They paid me off. Made it sound like they were doing me a favor, cleaning up Leo's youthful indiscretions. But your father, her voice trembled slightly. He made it very clear that if I ever spoke of it again, he would use his influence to ruin my reputation and my career. She took a deep breath. I signed it. I was scared and ashamed. But I kept a copy of everything, and I recorded the conversation with your father. Before I could fully absorb this new layer of horror, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Adler, my mother's closest friend, a woman I'd known my whole life. Her voice was strained. She wanted to meet for coffee. A sense of foreboding washed over me, but I agreed. Olivia gathered her documents. Don't let them talk you out of this, Clara, she said, her eyes meeting mine. Some families aren't worth saving. Some are just a fire you have to walk away from. At the cafe, Mrs. Adler was twisting a napkin in her hands. I had lunch with your mother yesterday, she began, avoiding my gaze. She's very distressed. She mentioned you've been looking into old family finances. She paused. I know she sent me here to try and smooth things over, to appeal to your sense of family loyalty. And are you going to? I asked quietly. She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep, weary sadness. No. I'm here because my conscience won't let me stay silent any longer. Clara, there's something you need to know about your grandmother's will. My heart seemed to stop beating. What about it? The trust fund she left you. For your education. Margaret told me years ago, in confidence, that Robert had invested it brilliantly for your future. I stared at her blankly. I had never received a trust fund. I had worked 2 jobs through university, graduating with a mountain of student loan debt that I was still diligently paying off. Mrs. Adler's face crumbled. Oh, dear God. You didn't know. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Clara, he emptied the account when you were 19. He used it to buy Leo that condominium downtown. The condo. The one Leo had boasted about, hosted lavish parties in, and then lost in a high-stakes poker game less than a year later. My entire college education, my future, handed over to him like a party favor. How much? My voice was barely audible. Your grandmother left you $250,000. The world tilted. $250,000. I thought of the late nights studying, fueled by cheap coffee and instant noodles. I thought of the panic I'd felt looking at tuition bills, the constant, grinding stress of making ends meet. All of it unnecessary. Margaret was heartbroken when Robert did it, Mrs. Adler continued, her hand reaching for mine across the table. But she would never defy him. Not when it came to Leo. I remembered my grandmother, her hand frail in mine in her final days, telling me she was so proud of the responsible young woman I'd become. She thought she was giving me a foundation for my future. Instead, my parents had used it as another brick in the wall they built to protect my brother from the world. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Found something. It's bad. Come home. I have to go, I told Mrs. Adler, my mind reeling. Thank you for telling me the truth. Clara, she said as I stood to leave. Your mother thinks you're being ungrateful, that this is just about money. But this was never just about the mortgage, was it? No, I said, the full scope of their betrayal finally clear. It's about a lifetime of it. Back at my house, Sophie was pacing, her face pale with fury. Remember the insurance settlement from your accident? She pointed to her laptop. Your dad didn't just cash it out. He moved it to an offshore account. It was a shell game, Clara. He used it as collateral to secure a private loan, which he then used to pay off another one of Leo's gambling debts. I sank into a chair, the air leaving my body. They had used my physical trauma, my broken bones and painful recovery, as a financial instrument to clean up his mess. I was literally paying for his sins with my own body. And there's more. Sophie's voice was gentle now. I found digital drafts in your dad's cloud storage. 3 other loan applications, Clara. All with your forged signature. They were trying to leverage your good credit for everything it was worth. The only reason they stopped is because the bank's fraud detection systems started flagging the activity. My stolen inheritance. My violated home. My purloined insurance settlement. Olivia's ruined finances. A lifetime of small thefts and grand betrayals. It wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was a philosophy. A way of life. Call our lawyer, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. It was as if I had moved past grief and anger into a place of cold, clear stillness. Tell him we have everything we need. We're no longer on the defensive. We're filing a formal complaint. Sophie nodded, her expression grim. What about your mother's anniversary party tomorrow night? She's been texting about it all day. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. It felt alien on my face. Oh, I'll be there, I said. And I'll be bringing copies. For everyone. Let's see them toast to 35 years of a partnership built on lies. The air in the police station was stale, thick with the smell of old coffee and quiet desperation. Detective Grant, a man with tired eyes and a surprisingly gentle demeanor, reviewed the contents of my file for the 3rd time. He looked up at me, his expression a mixture of professional gravity and personal disbelief. This is comprehensive, he said, shaking his head slightly. Forgery, wire fraud, financial identity theft. And this recording of your father threatening Olivia, he whistled softly. You're certain you want to proceed? Filing charges against your own parents is a significant step. They ceased to be my parents in any meaningful sense when they decided my identity was a commodity they could use and discard, I replied, my voice steady. While the detective took my official statement, Sophie was across town with our lawyer, filing cease and desist orders and preparing the civil suit. My phone, which I'd put on silent, lit up with a relentless series of notifications. My mother. My father. Then my mother again. Please, Clara. Talk to us. There are things you don't understand. Don't do this to your family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it. Sophie met me for lunch, her eyes bright with a grim sort of energy. The banks are cooperating, she said. Your father's reputation for integrity is a liability for them now. 2 of the banks where he submitted the failed loan applications are launching their own internal investigations. It's a domino effect. My phone buzzed again. This time, the screen read, Leo. I hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. What the hell did you do, Clara? His voice was a petulant whine, slurred with what was likely midday drinking. The bank just froze all my accounts. They said there's a fraud investigation. That's fascinating, I said calmly. It seems actions really do have consequences. This isn't a joke. I have expenses. How am I supposed to live? Perhaps you should have considered that before you gambled away the equity on my house. Mom and Dad were just trying to help me, he blustered. You've always been jealous. Why are you being such a bitch about this? Sophie snatched the phone from my hand. Listen here, you pathetic, entitled leech, she snapped. Your sister is done being your personal safety net. I suggest you find a lawyer. You're going to need one. She hung up, and a fresh barrage of texts from my mother immediately began. Leo is distraught. You need to call him. Please, Clara. Think about what you're doing. It's still all about him, I thought, a wave of weary resignation washing over me. Even now. Speaking of lawyers, Sophie said, checking her watch with a grim smile. The state investigators should be arriving at your father's office right about now. I pictured it clearly. My father in his corner office, the picture of tailored success, probably regaling a client with a story about his wonderful children. And then the quiet, official entry of two plainclothed investigators with a warrant. The first visible crack in his carefully curated world. My phone rang. It was Mr. Finch, his voice tight with panic. "Clara, what is happening?" "Federal agents just walked Robert out of his office in handcuffs." "Really?" I asked, my voice cool. "Was it a public spectacle?" "The entire firm saw it. He was in a meeting with the Henderson Portfolio Group, his biggest client." "That does sound embarrassing," I said. "Almost as embarrassing as rubber stamping a fraudulent loan application for a friend." There was a choked silence on the other end. "I told you I didn't know." "You have to believe me. You can tell that to the investigators, Mr. Finch. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your definition of due diligence." I hung up just as a news alert popped onto Sophie's phone. "Prominent Cedar Creek financial advisor detained in fraud investigation." "Your father is going to treasure that headline," she murmured. And now for the encore. She didn't have to wait long. My mother called, her voice no longer pleading, but a raw, hysterical shriek. I answered. "How could you?" She sobbed into the phone. "They arrested your father. At his work. In front of everyone. His reputation is ruined. How could you do this to him?" How could I? The dam of my composure finally broke, not in a flood of anger, but in a tidal wave of cold, hard truth. "How could you? You stole my inheritance. You stole my insurance money. You tried to let them take my home. You stood by and watched him systematically plunder my life to patch the holes in Leo's, and you called it love." "We were protecting our family," she shrieked. "No. You were protecting your image, and you were protecting Leo. You have never, not once, protected me." "Well, I'm protecting myself now. Please," she begged, her tone shifting again to desperate pleading. "Stop this. Drop the charges. We can sort this out as a family. Like you sorted it out with Olivia?" I asked quietly. "When you threatened and silenced a young woman your son had victimized, did you think that would never come to light?" There was a stunned silence. "How did you?" "I know everything, Mom. Every lie, every theft, every cover-up. And soon, the whole world will, too." I ended the call. Another news alert appeared, this one from a local society blog. The story was spreading like wildfire. "All those years your mother spent at luncheons, bragging about her perfect family," Sophie said softly. "The irony is staggering." My phone buzzed with texts. One from Mrs. Adler. "Margaret just had a complete meltdown at the country club. The truth is finally out." Another from Olivia. "Just saw the news. Thank you, Clara. You gave me the courage." Even my lawyer chimed in. "The DA's office is very interested in the pattern of behavior. They are expanding the investigation beyond the initial complaint." "How does it feel?" Sophie asked, watching my face. I thought of the foreclosure notice, of the quiet terror that had gripped me. I thought of my grandmother's trust, of my own body's trauma being monetized. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a fever breaking. Painful, gut-wrenching, but necessary. It felt like justice. My phone lit up one last time. It was Leo. His voice was no longer petulant, but small and terrified. "The police are at my door." "Clara, what do I do?" "For the first time in your life, Leo," I said, my voice soft. "Tell the truth." I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the setting sun. The light was golden and clear. My house, my small, precious sanctuary, was safe. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was too. Sophie raised her coffee cup. "To consequences." I clinked my cup against hers. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but it would be a road paved with truth. "To consequences," I echoed. Long overdue. The final confrontation wasn't in a courtroom, but in the living room of my parents' house, a week after my father's arrest. He was out on bail, confined to the house and stripped of his passport. My mother had summoned the extended family, my aunt and uncle, our childhood pastor, for what she had termed a healing intervention. It was, in reality, an ambush. "This has gone on long enough, Clara," my Uncle Thomas began, his tone one of grave disappointment. "We are here to help you find a path to forgiveness." I looked around the room at the circle of concerned, judgmental faces. My mother, her face puffy from crying. My father, looking deflated and gray in a cashmere sweater. And Leo, slouched in an armchair, radiating sullen resentment. "Forgiveness," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the heavy silence. "That's a beautiful concept. But it requires repentance, and before that, it requires an acknowledgement of the truth." I opened my laptop and connected it to their large-screen television. "Since we're all here for a healing intervention, let's start with a clear diagnosis of the wound." "Clara, please don't," my mother whispered. First, I began, clicking to the first slide, my grandmother's trust fund. $250,000, intended for my university education. A copy of her will appear on the screen, followed by the bank statement showing the account being emptied. It was used, instead, to purchase a condo for Leo. My aunt, my mother's sister, gasped softly. Next, the insurance settlement from my car accident. I was still recovering from surgery when my father transferred the funds to an offshore account to cover Leo's legal fees from a DUI. "That money was essential," my father interjected, his voice raspy. "For Leo, yes," I agreed. As were the multiple credit cards he opened in my name in college. The ones you paid off by taking out a second mortgage on your vacation home, a fact you hid from the rest of the family. "And that brings us to the most recent issue," I continued, my voice remaining calm and even. The forged home equity documents filled the screen, my forged signature magnified for all to see. This wasn't just stealing money. This was stealing my name, my security, my identity. This is a federal crime. We were desperate. My mother cried. Leo was in terrible trouble. And when has he not been? I turned my gaze to my brother. "Do you want to tell them about Olivia, Leo? About the $90,000 you defrauded from her? About how Mom and Dad paid her off and threatened her to ensure her silence?" The pastor cleared his throat. "Child, perhaps this is a matter for private prayer." "We are far beyond that, Pastor," I said gently. I clicked through the final slides, a decade's worth of bank statements showing the systematic siphoning of funds, property records, and finally, a transcript of the audio recording of my father intimidating Olivia. "Enough," my father roared, slamming his hand on the coffee table. "You are tearing this family apart." "No," I said, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. "I am simply holding up a mirror. You are the ones who tore it apart, piece by piece, lie by lie, over the course of decades." Leo lunged from his chair. "You sanctimonious witch. You think you're so much better than us." Uncle Thomas caught him by the arm, restraining him as he struggled. My mother dissolved into shuddering sobs. "Better? No. Just done," I said. "Done being the designated sacrifice. Done being the foundation you could crumble to rebuild his mistakes." I turned to the rest of them. "My father is under federal investigation. My brother is a co-conspirator. This isn't a family squabble. It's a criminal enterprise. There has to be another way," my aunt pleaded. "A private way." Was it private when they emptied my trust fund? Was it private when they forged my signature and nearly cost me my home? I looked at my mother. "You said they were threatening Leo's life over his debts." "They were," she screamed. "They would have killed him." The room fell silent. The terrible, unspoken truth hung in the air between us. "So you chose to sacrifice me instead," I said, the words falling like stones into a deep well. "Every single time, you chose him. So now, I'm making a choice, too. I'm choosing me." "What do you want, Clara?" my father asked, his voice a hollow echo of his former authority. "I want restitution. I want accountability. And I want the world to know that this perfect family you projected was a lie." "You'll never prove it," Leo sneered, though the bravado in his voice was thin. I pulled out my phone and turned the screen towards them, showing them the news articles, the headlines. "I already have. The investigation is expanding. Olivia has filed her own charges. Mr. Finch is cooperating with the authorities. Your business partners are being subpoenaed. You've ruined us, my mother whispered, looking at the wreckage of her life. No, I said, my voice softening with a sudden, profound sadness. You ruined yourselves. I just refuse to let you take me down with you. I packed my laptop. As I reached the door, I turned back for one last look at the tableau of my broken family. You know what the saddest part is? If you had just asked, if you had ever, once, come to me with honesty and humility, I would have given you anything. But you didn't respect me enough to ask. You only valued me enough to steal. Clara, don't leave like this, my mother pleaded, reaching a hand toward me. I'm not leaving, I said. I'm escaping. There's a profound difference. Outside, the cool evening air felt clean and fresh. Sophie was waiting in her car at the curb. How did it go? She asked gently. The truth was told, I said, getting in. I don't think they were ready to hear it. I looked back at the big house, the windows glowing warmly, belying the coldness within. It was a house I had once longed to be a part of, a family I had once ached to belong to. Now, I felt nothing but a quiet, solemn relief. They'll never forgive you for this, Sophie said. I know, I replied, looking ahead through the windshield at the open road. And for the first time, I think I'm finally ready to forgive myself for taking so long to save myself from them. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo. You will regret this. I thought of my little blue house, my garden waiting for its spring planting, my life waiting to be lived on my own terms. I smiled, a genuine, weary smile. No, I whispered to the empty car. But you will. Months later, the legal storm had passed, leaving a strange, quiet calm in its wake. My father, facing overwhelming evidence, accepted a plea bargain that included a prison sentence and a lifetime ban from the financial industry. Leo, convicted on both the fraud charges and Olivia's complaint, was serving a shorter sentence, followed by mandatory rehabilitation. My mother, after selling the house in Willow Bend for a fraction of its worth to cover legal fees and restitution, had moved to a small, anonymous apartment across the state. The final restitution check had arrived by courier a week earlier. I stared at the sum, a number that represented so much pain and betrayal. And then I signed it over, splitting it between a scholarship fund I established at my alma mater for students from low-income backgrounds and a new nonprofit Olivia had started to provide legal aid to victims of domestic financial abuse. The money was never the point. The point was the truth. The doorbell rang as I was sketching a new planting design in my sun-drenched office. It was Mrs. Adler, holding a small, dusty box. I was helping Margaret clear out her storage unit, she said, her smile gentle. She asked me to give this to you. Inside were photographs, a curated history of a happy childhood that had never really existed. Me at 5, smiling on a swing set, my father's arm just out of frame, pushing. Leo at 10, holding a trophy, my parents beaming on either side of him while I stood slightly apart, clapping politely. Our last family portrait, taken just before it all fell apart, our smiles bright and brittle. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry, Mrs. Adler said softly. Although I think she's more sorry about the consequences than the actions. I nodded. It was the most I could expect. How is she? She's quiet. She's joined a church. She volunteers. I think she's trying to build a different kind of life. A smaller, truer one. I picked up a photo of my grandmother, her eyes kind and knowing. I kept that one and placed the rest of the box on a high shelf in the closet, a history I no longer needed to revisit. My life had found a new rhythm. My landscaping business was thriving. I had taken on a project with the city, designing a series of small, public meditation gardens in forgotten urban spaces. I found a deep, quiet joy in creating pockets of peace for strangers. Sophie and I had dinner on my porch that evening, the air sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine I had planted along the railing. Did you see this? She asked, showing me an article on her phone. It was a feature on Olivia's nonprofit. My story, anonymized, was used as a case study. It often starts small, Olivia was quoted as saying, with a narrative, the responsible one and the troubled one. But love shouldn't be a liability. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. Clara, it's Mom. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. I planted some daffodils today. It made me think of you. I stared at the message, a complex swirl of emotions rising within me. The old sorrow was there, a faint echo. But it was overlaid with something new, a quiet, settled peace. The wound was no longer open and raw. It was a scar, a part of my history, but it no longer defined the shape of my present. Are you going to write back? Sophie asked, her voice gentle. I thought for a long moment. I thought about forgiveness, not as an act of absolution for them, but as an act of liberation for myself. I thought about boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as fences to protect the garden I had so carefully cultivated within myself. Maybe, I said, looking out at the twilight settling over my little blue house. Maybe someday. I didn't need to decide tonight. For the first time, the choice was entirely my own. The future was not a path I had to clear of their debris, but an open field, waiting for me to plant whatever I wished. And I had a feeling it was going to be beautiful.